August 29, 2005 changed the city of New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast forever. Hurricane Katrina made landfall with a massive storm surge, causing the failure of the canal systems around New Orleans. The resulting destruction prompted a never-before-seen national and international disaster relief response. The Scrap House Memorial to Hurricane Katrina was built by New Orleans artist Sally Heller and unveiled on August 29, 2009, the fourth anniversary of the storm. It stands across the street from the city's convention center, where many of the refugees lived after their homes were destroyed. On this week's episode of The Road to New Orleans, presented by New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, we discuss the effects of Hurricane Katrina on the city and how ministry has changed in its aftermath. Thanks for joining us again this week here on The Road to New Orleans. Now, the last time we were in New Orleans for the annual meeting, that was a very special moment for our guest this week. It's Fred Luter, the pastor of Franklin Avenue Baptist Church. Fred, thanks for being with us today.
Jonathan, it is an absolute honor, man, to be on with you, brother.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of, I'm sure, what is a busy schedule there in New Orleans. Now, when you reflect back on 2012, what really stands out from that moment that year?
It was just an incredible moment. First of all, the Southern Baptist Convention made history by electing the first African-American president in the history of Southern Baptist Convention. So, we got national attention, man. I got interviews from all over the country, all over the world about that event, man. And it was even more exciting because of the fact that it happened in my own hometown, the place where I grew up at, the place where I went to school at, a place where I pastored at. So I was able to be a part, and all my family was able to see it. My church members were able to see it. The leadership of our city was able to see it. Man, I felt like a celebrity for a day.
Well, you're a celebrity for much more than a day in the Southern Baptist Convention, at least to us. And, so talk to us a little bit about that. You mentioned that you had leaders from the city. How did that change? Did it help things in the city with you and the church and the leadership of the city at that time?
Well, God has always given us a lot of favor in the city because we were, the largest Southern Baptist convention church in the city. But it just kind of raised up our presence in the city even more. I got letters, from our mayor, from our council. I got a presentation, a proclamation from the council persons in our city. I got letters from pastors from all over the city and the state. I got a proclamation from our lieutenant governor, from our it was just really incredible. It really helped us to do more outreach in the city and in the community.
Yeah, and that's really cool because that was just a few years removed from Hurricane Katrina. Now, with us coming to New Orleans, the topic of Hurricane Katrina inevitably comes to mind. So take us back to 2005. What was that experience like, and how did that really shape how Southern Baptists were seen in the city?
Jonathan, it was the most difficult time in my spiritual walk with God. I was we had evacuated, my wife and I, to Birmingham, Alabama, where our daughter was going to Sanford University, and watching on the news and seeing the city that I grew up in, the city where I pastored at, underwater, the city underwater, the church underwater, home underwater. It really affected me to the point where I was just really in a situation where my faith was literally challenged because I could not understand how something like this can happen in America. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to read my Bible. I didn't want to preach. I really felt like, God, what is going on here? How could something like this happen in America? So it really was a difficult time for me. If it would not have been for the prayers of my pastor friends around the country and people that know me and were praying with me and for me, because my struggle was, to be honest with you, the city that I live in, the city I grew up in, my church was flooded. New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary was flooded. The schools in the neighborhood I was flooded. But Bourbon Street was high and dry. I couldn't understand. I couldn't wrap my head around that. And so I had a long talk with God about that, man. And but on the flip side, when Southern Baptists from across the country came to the rescue of New Orleans, It was just amazing. I mean, every week, groups and groups. There were college students who would normally be going to the beaches of Florida on their spring break. They were coming to New Orleans, man, to assist people. And here it is, not just assist Southern Baptist churches, but they were here to assist anybody and everybody that had a need. So much to the point. You know, our city is predominantly a Catholic church, a Catholic city. But our local newspaper, the Times-Picayune, did an article, an editorial, and I cut it out. I saved it because it was such a transforming time in my life for our convention. The article said this: if the Southern Baptist Convention was responsible for rebuilding New Orleans, it would be rebuilt by now. Wow. Man, that was I was so excited to hear that, because that's what I mean. The SBC disaster relief teams just came from all over the city and said, listen, we are the hands, the feet of Jesus Christ, and we're here to assist you, no matter your color, no matter your race, no matter your background, no matter your gender, no matter what your denomination is. Your city is hurting, and we're here to help out. It was incredible.
That's incredible. So let's talk about the church. You're a lifelong New Orleanian. Like, yes. How did the church change post Katrina? I know you guys had to like rebuild the entire church, right? I mean, but the church itself, you had people that were scattered all over the Southeast. I mean, you had people in Houston, you had people in Birmingham, all over the place. How did the church change post Katrina?
It changed. Before Katrina, we were the church gathered there at 2515 Franklin Avenue. After Katrina, we were the church scattered. It was like living the book of Acts all over again. We had thousands of members who had relocated. We had over 1,000 members that relocated to Houston, Texas, over 600 folk in Baton Rouge. We had people in Memphis, Tennessee, and Birmingham, Alabama. It was all over. So our internet services and our website was very critical at that time, because we was able to still connect with members all across the country who were scattered. Some people we didn't even know were living. We didn't know what their situation was. So it gave us more of a appreciation for people and understanding that this thing, this Katrina that almost destroyed our city, but on the other hand, it brought us closer together as a congregation, that we just don't take each other for granted.
Yeah. Well, I know it's not the perfect parallel, but a lot of what you're saying, it sounds a little bit like the pandemic era. Yeah. So what are the similarities? Are there similarities between a ministry in a post-Katrina New Orleans and a post-pandemic New Orleans?
The similarities are, if it were not for social media, if it were not for the internet, a lot of our churches would have been just eliminated. When we first started broadcasting on the internet, it was primarily for our sick and shut in. But thank God, when the pandemic hit, we were able to live stream our services, because New Orleans was hit so hard by COVID that we were only allowed by our mayor to have just 10 people in the church. It was me, a praise team, and our sound crew, our tech crew. So social media literally kept us together, kept us on pace, was able to find out what was going on with people's body. We had doctors come in on Wednesday night and to inform people about COVID, what they needed to do to protect themselves. We partnered with a local hospital here in the city and gave out over 3,000 vaccinations to the African American community, which really was suspect of getting the vaccination. But God used Franklin Avenue and God used our church, and so I believe we was able to help a whole lot of people like Katrina did. Yeah. But here in the pandemic time, it was just an incredible moment.
Yeah, like I said, it's not the perfect parallel, but you can hear the similarities between the two. So yes, what's we got Southern Baptists. There's going to be 10, 12, 15,000 Southern Baptists coming to town next June.
Come on down.
So what's the one thing that you wish every Southern Baptist could know about ministry in New Orleans?
Besides, we have the best food in the world.
Well, there's no argument there. We're going to get to that in a minute now.
Make sure everybody get their gumbo and their beignets and their char-grilled oysters. But we are a lost city, man. We're a lost city. We have a place there's a part of our city called the French Quarter where there are literally satanic churches. People worship demons, and there's a festival that goes on here once a year that's just really, really, really a satanic. So, but then all throughout the city, they're just lost people. So my prayer is that when the thousands and thousands of Southern Baptists come to town, enjoy the city, enjoy the food, but realize there's a lot of lost folk everywhere you go, from the airport to your hotel, throughout the city. So do all that you can to be lights and salt while you're here in the city of New Orleans.
That's a good word. And speaking of salt and food and all that, I mean, we can't talk to somebody from New Orleans without getting some tips. Like, what do you? I know you're a big fan of the Drago's char-grilled oysters. I mean, that is char-grilled oysters. That's something new to me this year, and I've never had them, but oh my word, they're incredible. Like, this is the first time I've ever had them, and they're amazing. So I'm like totally in on that.
At one of our local meetings, our president, Bart Barber, was in town, and I said, Bart, before you leave, you got to try the char-grilled oysters. He said, no, Fred, thanks, but no thanks. I don't like oysters. It's not something I would like. Well, last week when he was in town, he texted me an apology.
Yes.
And said, Fred, I need to apologize to you. These char-grilled oysters are really good.
I may or may not have been part of the peer pressure that was getting him to eat those as well. And then he looked at me and was like, I have been wrong, and I owe Fred an apology. So
and
that's amazing.
He texted me and apologized. I said,
that's amazing.
Char-grilled oyster, the gumbo, man, some of the best gumbo you ever want to taste. And of course, the beignets. Don't miss the beignets and the Cafe au lait, man. It's just
so. What's kind of your local spot that you go that maybe don't want people to know about, but at the same time you can't help but tell people about? What's your place?
Well, there's a whole lot of them. My wife and I, we go to a whole lot of different. Besides Drago, there's Acme House that does real good. People like chicken and a place called Zia's. That's really, really good. There's a local soul food restaurant called Dookie Chase. That's a very historical place in our city that was been here for years. That's very well known. There's a fried chicken place called Willie Mae's, and it goes on and on. Just depends on what you like. There's a place in New Orleans where you can find it. Absolutely.
Well, Pastor Luter, we appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for joining us this week on the road to New Orleans.
Thank you, Jonathan. My honor. Y'all come on down to New Orleans.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And we'll be with you in New Orleans this year. And we can't wait to see you in June. Thanks for joining us again this week on the road to New Orleans.